today we have Amanda Powers. She is the incoming FC Tucson Club president. Amanda is no stranger to competitive sports, the sports business, or the challenge of transforming promising local entrepreneurs into regional powerhouses. Today, as she gives her talk, the theme will be building the club with you in mind. So I'm going to bring Amanda on. Welcome, Amanda, and thank you for being here today.
Hello, thank you. It's a real honor and feels really good to kind of be in a startup sort of environment virtually like this.
We are so excited to have you. So I am going to leave you to introduce yourself a little bit more. Everyone, continue to introduce yourself in the comments. Give us any updates you have going on. And Amanda, I'm going to pull up your slides and let you take it from there.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, I want to thank Startup Tucson for this invitation today. I'm a newcomer to Tucson. I moved here the first week of January alone by way of Albuquerque. I grew up in San Diego and went to school in the Bay Area, North Bay. If you're familiar with that area, it's Sonoma State. I can kind of claim the Bay Area with that. And then lived in New Mexico for 12 years. By way of background, I have a business degree background, but I really kind of cut my teeth, experimenting at 19 with my first startup, which was a vegan raw food grocery store in San Diego. And just kind of from there, started a business, went to school, worked jobs for Fortune 500 companies, and just was always sort of capitalizing on opportunities whenever they kind of came in front of me. But when I was at school up in Northern California, I really kind of fell in love with the whole concept behind new economic thinking, doing less with more or doing more with less. And that was really based off of a couple of key books that were presented, which was C.K. Pralhad's Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid, which is basically innovating and creating businesses for people who lived on less than $2 a day. Confessions of an Economic Hitman. If you haven't read that already, it's a pretty interesting read. But those were sort of my formidable years in terms of developing an ethos of what I really believed the power of business and what it could do. Also teamed up with some of the folks in the East Bay, the founders of B Lab, so benefit corporations, and just was, kind of in that community. And then I went to New Mexico really only expecting to be there for a summer to pitch a tent in my mom's backyard in the mountains and kind of, assess what my next steps were going to be, and ended up staying for 12 years. So, and in that process, as Kanisha mentioned, I have a background in athletics. I was an All-American, NCAA All-American athlete, swimmer. I coached. I also was a runner, water polo, softball, you name it. I did it all except for soccer. But sports really, I think, gives you that sort of competitive edge that is helpful when you're trying to be a visionary and, being competitive and trying to do the best work. And I think also just having a lot of grit and tenacity. In the 12 years that I spent in New Mexico, I think it's worth noting that my path to where I am today, really, it's like I could have never have imagined being kind of in my dream job, which I'm doing now. When I first kind of launched my career in New Mexico, I worked in transportation and logistics for Fortune 300 companies, mostly sales-driven work, but it was still in line with international business and understanding logistics, which was always interesting, and economics. And, I got into some sales jobs, selling insurance and working in financial services eventually. And I just really felt like there was no opportunities for me in Albuquerque that were big enough. So I took some risks, like many of you probably do every day. And I just leaned on my network. I was really involved with the TED community, TEDx. Albuquerque had one of the largest TEDx communities in the nation for quite a while there. They started their group in 2009, and I was part of the leadership team there for 5 years. And we did upwards of 18 events a year with marquee event for 2,000 people. And that really allowed me to kind of get to know, a really diverse sort of ecosystem from the defense. The Air Force is, prominent there, similar to here. And get to know everything from education. The film industry is huge in New Mexico as well. So I really got to kind of have this holistic and diverse sort of network of people that all kind of came in through TED, which is probably similar to some of the ecosystem that you guys are experiencing, where there's these certain groups here in town that are making some really unique connections, which is ultimately creating collaboration and innovation. I also was really involved with creative startups back in Albuquerque as well. So again, it's nice to be with this crowd. And since I moved here in January, I haven't really had a chance to go get coffee and network much. We had a big vision of what we were trying to accomplish here for Tucson and FC Tucson. And we kind of hit the ground running. And then Corona hit, at the day after we launched our season ticket sales on March 11th, the day after we suspended our season. And I'll talk a little more about that. But, I still went back to Albuquerque to move my husband and my animals down to Tucson on March 20th. So just the timing of all of this has been wild. And here we are in August, and I'm just finally getting to meet people like you guys. While we've been trying to manage, sort of the hour to hour, day by day that coronavirus is sort of, created for our new lives, our new normal here. So I will talk a little bit more about how I got into soccer and kind of the entrepreneurial sort of spirit that landed me there. But, I think it was just important to kind of share that, the work that you guys are doing individually and collectively is so important. There's an energy to it. It permeates sort of, some days you might not recognize the good that you're doing, and some days you might not feel like you're winning. And then some days you probably feel like you're winning. And all I've got to say to that is, take it one day at a time, and never stop thinking big, especially right now where we need really, truly systems thinkers and people who are learning how to do more with less. So the topic of my talk today is soccer as a platform for social and economic good. And I use this sort of subheading, building the club with you in mind. And I came up with that because when I was sort of interviewing for certain jobs, my sister asked me a good question. She's like, why you? Why pick you over anyone else? And I said, it's not because I have the acumen necessarily or the competency so much, or maybe I don't want to say that so much. I think what it is for the kinds of work that I do, which is basically give me a big idea and let me try to put a group of people together to accomplish that big idea. And it starts sort of with the people while you're building the product. And so the answer to my sister was, I understand humans. I understand that marketers as a whole don't give consumers enough credit for their, savviness and their ability to research. And the consumer today wants an authentic experience, and they want an authentic product put in front of them, not just something that was cooked up in some fancy brand and marketing laboratory. And so when we say we're building the club with you in mind, I take sort of my market research background and working with a lot of tools and understanding economics and demographic data. And then I like to really listen to people and observe sort of the sociology of what's going on in the community to tailor my product or my company's message. And that way people can look at the product or the club or the team and go, yeah, I want a part of that. I want to be a part of that. I want to support that. So that's what I mean by building the club with you in mind. And I think some of the slides that I'll show you today will just sort of reveal that. Thank you. I've got two screens, so I'm trying to like look at the comments, but thank you so much. And good morning. Just by a show of hands or just in the comments, is there anybody here who is familiar with FC Tucson and knows what FC Tucson is? Okay, so it looks like no one, which is good. I know that sounds kind of contrary, but let me just give you a brief overview of what FC Tucson is as a whole. Well, first of all, it's been around for 10 years. The club was founded in 2010, and it started out in as an events company by a small group of passionate entrepreneurs who were hardcore soccer fans who knew that there was oh, yes. Okay, awesome. Jessica and Laura. Thank you. So FC Tucson was founded by some really passionate soccer fanatics who had some really strong connections to high levels of soccer around the US and around the world. And they also were coaching here locally in the youth system and high school system. And they just knew that Tucson was going to be this really strong market for soccer. And they thought that, one of the ways that they could really grow the sport here was to host an MLS preseason. MLS is Major League Soccer. But this was back in 2010. MLS was founded, 25 years ago. So soccer is somewhat new in that regard. And these entrepreneurs founded the MLS preseason, which at that time was called the Desert Diamond Cup. And they basically leveraged their network, and they said, hey, let's bring 6 to 12 teams, down to Tucson for 6 weeks. We'll let them train in the great weather and the facilities that we have here. And then let's have a cup match, so a series of games that would basically pay for a cup. And so that's how FC Tucson actually started. And then a team was put together to play in this cup. So, Rick Shantz, who now is the coach at Phoenix Rising, was one of the co-founders of FC Tucson, and then John Perlman, who's now our director of soccer operations. We're basically holding trials for this team to come out and play against these MLS teams. And the first year that it occurred, there was not a soccer stadium that could really host this event accurately. Awesome. And so I'm just looking at Jessica's comments. She's so passionate. So the first time that this event was held was at High Corbett Field. And at that time, the MLS had brought in big, sort of European footballers like David Beckham, who I'm sure most of you have heard of. And David Beckham at that time was playing for the LA Galaxy, who was here for this MLS preseason Desert Diamond Cup. And it attracted almost 10,000 fans. And so for those of you who are working on a proof of concept or have proven your proof of concept, that was the proof of concept that there was a market here for soccer, both qualitatively and quantitatively. So after that, FC Tucson events then formed FC Tucson, the soccer club. And they were basically a semi-pro team for approximately 8 of those years. Just as an overview, and I apologize. I don't have, when I usually talk about soccer, and admittedly, I am not a soccer expert. I have never played soccer. I've played a couple times, just like playing around with friends, but I am not a technical soccer expert. I leave that to my technical team. But I am basically a community activist who happens to be in the business of soccer. And what has been proven to me time and time again is that this really is a platform that unifies all people because it's the world's game. And that's what I believe in. And that's why, hence, this is sort of my dream job, because I can use this platform to like bring people together in certainly some really extraordinary ways, and ultimately sort of spread hope and inspiration, which I don't think necessarily has a measurable economic impact, but I'm sure we can find some new economic thinkers in the room who could probably measure what that impact is, especially today where we need it more than ever. But by way of an overview of what the USL is, so if I'm sure many of you have heard of what the FIFA World Cup is, and I'm sure you've all heard of what the US Olympics are, and you know that the women's team here in the United States is very, very good, and they always make the World Cup. And then also, you've got the Olympics where the women's team does very well. Well, unfortunately, the men's team over the last few years has just not been able to qualify for these tournaments. And I think we kind of take it for granted. And I would say that every sort of proud American, anybody who has that sense of pride about their identity or their country, I know there's a lot going on socially. We could probably talk about that for hours as well. But I think, again, at this, people are probably reflecting upon what it means to be a patriotic American. And for me, just like growing up and being an athlete, it was the Olympics. And I always even tear up, like today, if I see a replay of the Olympics, or if I see this like winning shot in this like groundbreaking game in the World Cup, and it gives me chills and makes me cry. And that's kind of like, for me, what my patriotism is. And so, not to get too tangential there, but if you care about your community, if you care about, the country, I say you need to care about FC Tucson. And the reason being is that we really are trying to carve a path to professional play for all kids, and not just kids who pay to play in a club system, but also kids who don't have the same sort of opportunities that those kids in the clubs do. That is why you need to care about FC Tucson. And the way we do that is through this system, this sort of developmental system, and that is growing here in the United States, but it's been very prominent in Europe for a very, very long time. The United States is just sort of catching up to this. In baseball, you have major leagues, and then the minor league and the AA system, the single A farm team system, and the major league teams own those teams and they develop players. Well, similarly, soccer in the United States is trying to do the same thing, but it's not done on a league basis. And what we are doing at FC Tucson under the league moniker, United Soccer League, is we're really trying to create these sort of path to pro opportunities. So in this slide, you've got these two different levels of soccer. Just above here would be the MLS. And then above that, and who oversees all of that, is U.S. Soccer and the U.S. national team. This is MLS would be considered the first division of professional soccer. USL Championship is the second. And we are in League One, FC Tucson is, which is the third division, but it is pro. FC Tucson used to be here in the amateur level. So back in 2011, all the way up until through 2018, we were here in this sort of amateur division. And actually, if you go on our website, we have a club page with some of our history. We've got a really deep history there of how much we won. So much it hurt. There was so much winning going on in those years in terms of clinching different divisional playoffs and championships. So there's a nice, rich heritage of good football in this community. This here is right below that, which is this youth academy, which we're going to be rolling out in 2021. And really, this is what I mean by a path to pro. So from just a kind of 10,000 foot view, we are a professional sports team here that is soccer. Our season is from March until October. And then throughout the off season, also we do have FC Tucson women. Unfortunately, due to COVID, they play in the WPSL. We had to, postpone the season this year. But a lot of really great talent women have gone on to have professional careers through that league. But we're really trying to find basically the next Messi, And so this year, what we're focusing on is reaching out to different communities within Tucson who don't know who the club is, and also just making soccer is that bridge that brings all people together. I don't care what political party you are. I don't care, I want people to come together around this sort of enthusiastic sort of altruistic mission and goal in mind, which is to have Tucson pride and to really support the growth of a sports league. We are still very much in our infancy, and this next slide sort of demonstrates that. The League One teams, there's 12 teams in the league. The USL Championship has 37 teams. So, you have to, I'm constantly reminded, like, the NFL wasn't built in a day. The MLB wasn't built in a day. Same with the NBA, and neither was the MLS. There's like these amazing stories of how these sports leagues came to grow in their own, and what sort of influential people came to financially support them, but also what sort of powerhouses and ambassadors around the world came together to get these leagues up and going. And ultimately finding good owners of these individual franchises that you see here to want to invest in a new league because they see that greater prosperity for soccer in America. So so with League One, you can see Tucson over here in the southwest corner. And then we've got some, you probably recognize if you're an MLS fan, some MLS team affiliations there. Toronto FC 2, up in the New England area, you have the New England Revolution 2. And then down south, you've got David Beckham's new team, Inter Miami, who we just played against Fort Lauderdale down in Fort Lauderdale, and then Orlando City B, and then North Texas. So we have about 5 teams from the MLS side that are in this league that are considered their 2 teams. But then you have these independent teams like Forward Madison, who came out last year, and they get over 5,000 fans a game to their matches, and their mascot is a flamingo. And so if you ever go to their social, you'll see this like fantastic Go Mingo sort of tribe movement that they have going on there. And then you have brand new teams like Union Omaha, who will be playing Saturday. That is a baseball ownership group that also bought the soccer team. So really diverse sort of businesses here. And just to talk a little bit about how COVID, if you think about some of the challenges that you guys are experiencing, I mean, one thing I'll say that's been really interesting is that, we're a league and we have a board of governors, and I'm a board of governor, and our owner, we're owned by Phoenix Rising, and we have a Brett Johnson is a very active member of the ownership group that oversees what we do here at Tucson. And we vote on these league decisions. So when the season stopped in March, just like many of you, it felt like 9/11. It was total shock and paralysis. And you're just literally you like don't know what to do, but you know what to do, and you're just sort of waiting for that next round of information to come through. We were all going through together. And then some point in early April, I was a member of the COVID task force, which basically we met 3 times a week, and we still meet every week to outline the medical protocols. And it was pretty clear to us early on this was going to be bad. It's not going to go away anytime soon, and we needed to develop an ethos. And that ethos of what we needed to develop was, who are we as a club if we can't play soccer? What are we going to do in this community if we can't go out and do what we got to do? I've got players who are on guaranteed contracts through October, so I got to pay for them, including their housing and their food between now and the end of October. So what are we going to do? And I had to pull my coaches aside and say, do we believe the same thing? So again, like for many of you who have CEOs and COOs, or CFO and a CEO in your startup, ethos and that culture building is so important to constantly remind yourself of like your mission and also what your belief system is in organization. Because when you are tested, like COVID has tested us, you have to point to something and get buy-in and commitment to say, do we believe this? And it was a really difficult conversation being I'm the second ever female president in men's pro soccer. I've never had to oversee a technical staff or coaches before. And I had to pull my guys aside to say, if we think this is as bad as we think it's going to be, then our community is going to need us. And we're going to have to show up for the community in ways that these young footballers have never had to think about before. So some of these guys are fresh out of college, or they've been playing, in academy systems around the world, haven't really had to do much for themselves ever. Really, they've been taken care of. And now we might need them to go pack food boxes. We might need them to donate blood. We might need them to go deliver food and put their bodies at risk. And that's a really hard conversation to have. And I wasn't saying at that moment back in early April that that's what we had to do, but we had to at least have that discussion up front so that we could operate strategically, with some sort of belief system that there maybe was some integrity behind, enough so that I could make decisions as the figurehead of this company, to lead us in a path, knowing that I had the back of my team. So that's sort of an interesting point. And I knew that was going on the micro level of my team. But what's super interesting as a sports league is that I don't know if that was going on, those conversations as deep as or intense as that was going on with these other teams. I think COVID for sure has revealed that we have to think new, in terms of finance and ROI, and traditional means of sort of profit. But it's been very interesting to watch the league work in a board of governor to make a decision as a group to protect the brand of the league. And ultimately, we knew it was going to be about contact tracing and testing, and basically creating these little bubbles for our players. So we developed a set of medical protocols this year that allow our players to basically, or require our players to basically shelter in place. And I think I'm going way over my time. Anyway, I'm going to try to wrap it up here, but to shelter in place and then test regularly. But how do you do that when you have to travel across the country in commercial airfare? And meanwhile, all the other leagues, are creating bubble systems. And we looked at that. And there was this ethos that was developed at the league level that said, hey, we're agile enough where we don't have the salaries of, an NBA team or an MLB team or an NFL team, but we have this connection to our community, and we have this responsibility to our sponsors in the community, that we felt like this was the quintessential time to move forward when no other sports leagues in America are moving forward with a travel schedule like this. So that I spent a lot of time on that, realizing probably I needed to, just because it's just so much to talk about over the last 4 months, and how you navigate a board of people who have their own business agendas, but make a collective decision like that. Super interesting to be a part of that. And here we are, we're playing this Saturday. I'm going to just jump ahead a few more slides. I think it's worth noting, that the vision that we have for Tucson, and one of the reasons why I was hired here in Tucson, and I'll jump to that in a second as well, was I had some pretty substantial success in New Mexico, with a club there, USL Championship Club, New Mexico United. If you look them up on Instagram, you can really see they're sort of a beautiful, creative team that works with Meow Wolf. And I'm a co-founder and startup COO for that organization. And I left in May of 2019. We were getting 13,000 fans a game. And to be really honest, I was burnt out. My work there was done. And I think that for those of you who have CEO, COO relationships, I constantly found myself looking up Harvard Business Review articles on, hey, is a CEO and COO supposed to be like this? And why do you hire a COO? And when do you hire a CFO? There's so many great resources out there. And like, sometimes when you think you're crazy in this relationship that you have with your CEO, as the COO, you're like, God, and ultimately my work there was done, and I was able to hand things off, and they had a CAO come in. I think they should have had a CFO come in, but that's another story. But ultimately, we had great success. And then I left to go do some consulting around the league. And then I got a call in October saying, hey, can you come and do this for Tucson? We love what you did in New Mexico. We believe in your ability to build these movements around soccer and have a big vision for the club. So come on down here. We think Tucson has this ability to grow. So ultimately, I arrived I got hired in November, had an offsite retreat with the existing staff. This is a 9-year-old club that did need there was some toxicity within the culture, and it wasn't necessarily here in Tucson. It was being managed in Phoenix, and we needed to kind of rejuvenate the spirit of the club. And I just sort of took a look back, and much as what you would do in a sort of when you take over a company, is kind of see where the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are. And ultimately, what I decided to focus on for this year was honoring our heritage and making this more of a community-based team that was honoring Sonoran Desert, Southern Arizona, the history of this FC Tucson, and then really trying to get more non-soccer people to know who FC Tucson is. And so, my ownership group has complete faith and trust in me and what I'm doing down here. And so ultimately, we this year, it was all about Fuerza Tucson. We started this campaign with bandanas in January. We had a kickoff party right at the tail end of the MLS preseason event. We had all this momentum going on. We invested in our player payroll so that basically I realized if you're not winning soccer games, you're not going to have fans in the stands. So we invested more in the payroll. And ultimately, I wanted to rebuild FC Tucson with a data strategy in mind as well. And so we just launched our app about 5 weeks ago, and really kind of building things almost like a software tech company, so to speak, but ultimately wrapped around a marketing and branding production industry. So what we do is we focus on players, community, and entertainment. And that's sort of the triangle that we always have these sort of check boxes whenever we're developing content or we're going to roll out an initiative. We're always thinking, okay, player focus, community focus, and is this entertaining? But ultimately, the vision I want to cast in your minds is that in 2 years' time from now, I'd love for us to be playing in the USL Championship, which is the higher level. And I'd love for us to have a downtown facility where we're packing the stands with more than 10,000 people. And if we can do that in Albuquerque, I know we can do that here in Tucson. But it takes, trust, it takes vision, and it takes the support of, and a lot of reciprocity, which is ultimately what we've been doing this year. I know I'm kind of breezing by. I just wanted to also flash up some of our sponsors and partners that we're working with this year. Just in the last month, as like many of you, my pro forma is a nightmare. So coming into today, we are going to be playing behind closed doors. All of our games are streamed on ESPN Plus. Those costs are not going away. So we decided to double down on our digital and our broadcast strategy. And so we are going to curate the broadcast more. We're going to brighten it up. We've got we've got a music festival partner who's helping us to brighten Keno up so that when you see that ESPN broadcast, you're like, God, that looks really good. And then we just recently had a call to action for all the community to show up with a TIFO or a sign, because this is really our time, for a time for Tucson to kind of say something, and we're putting it out to you and the public to say, what do you want to say about this club? Because now it's on ESPN Plus. Our viewership is way up. And what we are going to do is host these sort of live watch parties downtown and at the downtown El Toro Carpool Cinema. So we're trying to innovate wherever we can. And in this process, I've also had to do weekly COVID testing. That just added $50,000 to my budget that wasn't there before. My revenues are gone. And so showing up right now during all of this time, it's like, okay, community, players, entertainment, how do I meet those things? And still, try to keep my expenses down and find some sort of way to drive revenue. And so we were able to kind of land some sponsorships during this time. AZ Fit Kitchen, for example, is a meal prep company here. We pay for player meals. They've been able to discount our meals significantly and still give our players nutritious food. We did work out a deal with, our testing partner. So there's some really interesting stuff that's happening sort of behind the scenes that you don't see. And so I do flash this up, not as like a shameless plug for our sponsors, but like, we really believe like they have stood by us during this whole time. And I'm just like eternally grateful for that. Okay. I think that, I had another presentation. I'd be happy to share this with the group, but I was going to talk a little bit more about how, New Mexico United really evolved, and I'd be happy to, and really what it was a grassroots movement. And it's a little bit different here in Tucson because the club's been here for 10 years. But we are trying to rebuild that again. And I got to be really careful, especially right now, like how do you build community and grassroots movements when you can't gather? That's the fundamental, like, difficult question. And so we're just trying our very best to spread the message a little bit about our vision. This is just some of the work, what we did in New Mexico was really brought some, unique people to the table. I bring the innovators, the tech people, the foodies, the craft beer, the musicians, like the muralists, the vatos, the vatas. Let's all bring it together and like make this beautiful sort of community patchwork around the beautiful game. So what I was just going to share here, and I'll wrap it up and open it up for questions, is basically, building the club with you in mind. Sometimes if you're looking at your product and you're like, okay, what's the true market demand for my product, and what's that penetration rate? We can take the numbers and do the quantitative analysis to determine that, to set all sorts of things in motion, including your marketing budget, your scale up, the different types of, omni-channel marketing that you might be doing for your product. But I'll tell you, you can do all that, but if your mission is not clear to people, they're not going to buy it. Or they will, but the loyalty to that brand and the enthusiasm for that brand, I believe, is going to be so much more sustainable and so much more powerful when people know your mission. And, the mission at New Mexico United, anyway, was to bring people together in ways they never experienced before. And I'll tell you just very candidly that when I came here, there wasn't really a mission for FC Tucson. There had been something written, and it felt a little, okay, are we still, adhering to this mission? And candidly, during COVID, we've been trying to kind of redevelop what that mission is. And so I don't have a flashy mission that I can just spat off to you right now. But if you go to our website, we do post our mission there. But I think much like, I don't necessarily believe in marketing plans. I kind of just believe a little bit more in storytelling. I think our mission right now is the story that we're kind of writing in real time. And I think come the end of 2020, we'll probably have a new mission that's kind of going to be defined by what we do today.